what I'm saying is that sales isn't just about the conversation on a sales call. When you have something that is so clearly communicated and you know that you have an audience that need the very solution that you are offering, it does. And I know you talk about this a lot as well. You do become more magnetic. It's not the only way to do it, but it can really make it so much easier for you to sell before you've even had a conversation. To go back to what you were saying is that there is only one way and that it has to be something that feels awkward and difficult. When you passionate about what you do and when you spend time believing that you truly make a difference to the people whose lives you will impact or whose business you will impact, sales can start to feel really different.
Hello and welcome to the Art of Value Whispering podcast. I'm your host, Melitta Campbell, business coach, value whisperer, and advocate for introverted female experts who want to grow a business that feels aligned, meaningful, and impactful. Each week on this show, I explore what it really takes to adopt a quieter, smarter way for introverts to market their small business that results in a smoother and often faster business growth through meaningful marketing, value-driven sales, and self-leadership. So if you're ready to attract more of your dream clients, sell with confidence, and create lasting success on your own terms, you are in the right place. And my guest today is Suman Randhawa. And as soon as I tell you the title of her book, you're going to know exactly why she's the perfect guest for this show. She's just written a book called More Heart, Less Hustle, Generate Consistent, Ethical Sales for Your Small Business. Suman helps founders sell with confidence by refining their sales approach and messaging so they attract and convert more of the right clients without ever feeling salesy. She is just the perfect guest, and in our discussion, she gives a complete masterclass. We cover whether you should or shouldn't be on social media, the proper way to do direct messages, to start relationships with potential clients. We're going to look at what does it mean to have an authentic sales voice? What are those fundamentals you need to know for successful sales? So much coming your way. So hi, Suman. It's great to have you with us on the show today.
Thank you so much, Melitta. It's great to be here.
And we are going to dive into sales. And I think as soon as we say the title of your new book, people are going to understand your angle on sales. It's called More Heart, Less Hustle. I love that. So we will dive into your tips for selling with heart and less hustle in just a moment. But before we do, I'd love it if you could share with the audience your journey. How did you come to be in sales and to be advising small business owners? And why do you believe that we need to bring more heart into sales?
Okay, thank you, Melitta. It's a nice, broad question for me. So I will try and kind of summarize it in a way that doesn't feel like too overwhelming. Ultimately, it was my whole corporate career. So ever since graduating from university, which I don't want to completely give away my age, but let's say it was 1993 that I graduated. And you that are old enough to remember will know that we were in a recession. So back in 93, I graduated. I'd actually wanted to work in the world of broadcast or production, and that just wasn't happening. So I looked at what I was naturally really good at. And the one thing that I've always loved is I love communicating. I love speaking to people. And I am actually probably the perfect person to sell to because I love understanding what it's like to be a consumer. And I just love spending my money. So it was like a natural fit for me. I ended up in advertising sales and I started that career, 3 decades ago now. And I built up a pretty successful career running sales teams, and I worked in lots of different markets, mainly working in advertising sales. But then for the last 10 years of my corporate career, I moved over to Harrods. So it was then about developing your luxury customer, so your most loyal customer in the store. So it was using the skill set that I had, but in a very different way. So that kind of combination of all my career, it took me to, I have literally just summed up like 20 plus years in like a couple of minutes there. But it took me to turning 50 was not that far away. My father had just passed away. And I think as many people would relate to, I was just at that stage in my life where I thought I really need to make a decision about what the rest of my time from here looks like. I wanted to do something using my skill set. I'd always known I was not your typical bolshy salesperson. Yes, I do love speaking to people. Yes, I am, fairly confident to walk into a room, but I always sold based on building great relationships. In terms of like targets or have aggressive sales conversations, that was never me. And I realized that there was a much more heart-led approach that had led to me having a lot of success over those years. And because I'd managed so many people, I'd also realized that actually being successful at sales, there's not like one template. You don't have to be one type of person. So like a really quick way to summarize that is I wanted more purpose in my life. I wanted to do something that was more meaningful, as a lot of us will relate to. I'd also been in corporate a very, very long time. I am so grateful for all the experience I had, but I didn't want the final 20 years of my career to be decided by somebody else. I wanted to take charge of my destiny. And then, the pandemic happened. For a lot of people I know, the pandemic was understandably actually a really challenging time. I'm not one of those people. For me, it was the year after my dad had passed away. Work had been incredibly stressful. It was probably the first time in my adult life that I had stopped. I don't have any children, so I didn't have that to consider. And suddenly I got, I just got to feel what peace felt like. I started to find a lot of joy in using my skill set to help people who were struggling at that time. And that almost was the beginning 4 years ago of me kind of becoming an accidental coach in inverted commas, because I'm not a qualified coach, I'm a consultant and a mentor. But I became like an accidental coach who, parallel to that, had started working with a life coach, was looking for more purpose in life. And then it all kind of came together over those 2 years, and the rest, as they say, is history. And this second and very exciting chapter of life, like who knew that life would get this exciting post 50?
Yeah. And I think when you start your own business, at first you're kind of like, oh, can I really do this? But as soon as you go in and start helping people, you just start to see just how many ways you can bring value in new and exciting ways. And when you're working with other small business owners, like we both are, then you help unlock that for more and more people. And yeah, it's really exciting. It's just the beginning.
And I think, what you just said there is so true. It was knowing that I had a skill and realizing that I could help other people who perhaps didn't come from a sales background. I know we're going to go into it, but sales has a bit of a reputation. They generally create a lot of anxiety in people because of the old school reputation that it has. And let's be honest, you just have to search through your social media feed, and some of the content there doesn't feel very aligned if you are somebody who wants to follow a more heart-led approach to sales. But I think what you said there is probably what resonated with me the most when I launched my own business. I knew I could use my skills to help other incredible people who were changing the world through the work that they did. I could help them reach more people. And I think that was like the light bulb moment for me, was actually I can use this with really good intent to help somebody else make loads of money, or just to help somebody else have a huge impact on someone else's life or business. So yeah, that was the penny drop moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. And just from reading your book cover, there were so many questions I had, because I was like, oh, yes. And there's one thing that stood out for me. And one thing I've heard from other sales coaches is like, there are the 7 doors you have to unlock to get a sale. There are the 9 this, the 5 that, the whatever. And everyone just has these different rules, and they're very insistent. These are the only rules, you have to know these to work. And then you say the sales fundamentals that matter, which I was like, ooh, that sounds like it's very, as you're saying, there's a lot of anxiety around sales. One of my first guests was Lisa McLeod, and she made the point that sales done well, we don't necessarily think of it as sales.
Absolutely.
Sales done badly is what we don't want to do, because we know that felt so horrible. We don't want to inflict anyone else with that.
Exactly.
I love this idea that the fundamentals that matter seem to, for me, align with that idea that, all of these things that we think are sales is sales done badly, but sales done right comes down to a few small points of understanding. Is that where this is going?
Yeah, definitely. And kind of, it's really interesting. I'm not saying I've never been that person that wasn't like, this is the structure. But again, I didn't intend for this to be a conversation about age, but it's just naturally, I think it's just showing how I've evolved. And what I realized, particularly with the number of small business owners that I work with, who are predominantly, but not all women, but predominantly women aged 40 plus. And actually, what I realized is so many of these business owners don't want to be told to fit in a box. They don't want to have to work. And actually, there was a huge amount of resistance to feeling like you had to be on social media all the time. Now, I love social media, but even I have my weeks where there's just a bit of a creative block. However, because I've got the fundamentals right, now is a perfect time. I'm probably the least active I've been, but it's the busiest I've ever been. And that comes from lots of acorns that have been planted over time. It's about being in the right spaces. It's about repeating my message so many times over the last few years that it becomes really obvious what I stand for. And then other people are selling for me because, I did a post on social media where I was looking at how many posts have mentioned my book since it was launched. In a month, we're looking at over 50 individual posts, looking at how many people mention me positively in a post on a weekly basis. On a good week, 3 or 4 times. And that's just an example. But I think what I'm saying is that sales isn't just about the conversation on a sales call. When you have something that is so clearly communicated and you know that you have an audience that need the very solution that you are offering, it does. And I know you talk about this a lot as well. You do become more magnetic. It's not the only way to do it, but it can really make it so much easier for you to sell before you've even had a conversation.
Yeah. And I think, there are some fears around this as well, that having a niche, being really clear, having one thing that you talk about over and over and just keep repeating it. And my background is in marketing and communications. The last sort of 5 years of that, I was working in leadership and internal communications. So this was communicating to people within an organization who knew that organization, knew its rules and culture and strategy and everything, or at least should do. But even for those people, we had to repeat the strategy and how something linked into the bigger picture in every single message. And these are people who are living in that environment every day. And our clients spend 99.9% of their time consuming everyone else's content, everyone else's website, not ours. So we have to have that repetition to have even a chance of that recognition and recall as well. So yeah, I'm 100% with you on that.
And I suppose, it's quite interesting because particularly when I think about the nature of your podcast, so I know we're going to go into this, but it can feel like it's quite alienating when you tell people that, you need to repeat your message and you need to be seen in lots of different places. But I think where sometimes the information out there can leave people feeling so uncomfortable about sales is where somebody feels they have to do one way and one thing. And I'm not saying for one second that the advice of anybody who said you need, there's these particular number of doors you need to go through, or there's particular ways of doing it. I think we have a responsibility too sometimes to choose how we interpret the information that's out there. So I think we get to use our filter as well and think about, well, how is this going to work best for me? But I think we always look at the results. Ultimately, if the way you're doing things is not making you the money you need to make in your business, then it's definitely worth considering what is the advice out there and which of that advice around sales resonates the most with the way in which you show up. And I know we'll get to talk about that a bit.
Yeah, it's like with marketing, there's no one way to do anything. And if anyone says that, I think you should just run the opposite way, because either it means that they don't know any other way, and that's why they're just saying that way, or they just don't understand how other businesses work. So I think it rings alarm bells. And the number of calls I have with people is like, well, I know it didn't feel right, but it was the only thing I need to do. So, when you don't have that sales and marketing background, you do fall prey a little bit to these nonsenses. So, lots of questions popping up for me here. So let's start with this one. If someone who has more sales experience and knowledge than you is giving you advice,
Yeah.
but to your heart, it doesn't feel right, how can we discern if we should listen to ourselves or that particular expert? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. And interestingly enough, even as a sales mentor consultant myself, I have regularly worked with people that I see as either further along or they have a different level of experience. So it might be that they are running a far bigger business or they have worked in different markets. So I'm also regularly surrounded by people who will give me guidance and advice. I think if you hear a message repeated often enough, then that means there is something generally in it. Because if enough people that you trust, because I think that's the first question, are they trusted? Do they feel like they understand you and your style and the type of business you're running? So if those fundamentals are in place, then well, there's a bit of a match here. That's why you're listening to them. And then it's really listening to, is that resistance just fear? Fear because it feels uncomfortable, fear because you think you're going to be judged. One of the most, I use this word not to be flippant, but the first time this was said to me, I was like, that is so true. One of the most triggering things you can do is run a business. So for me as a sales coach, not only am I running a business, but I'm also a sales consultant who, in inverted commas, is putting herself up for rejection day in, day out. You have to recognize it's not you that is for sale. You need to separate yourself from what the purpose of sales is. And it is just to make it easier for somebody to be able to find a solution to the desire or the problem that they might have. So to go back to your question, I think if you trust the person who is giving you the advice, if they feel aligned with your style, if they are the expert and you are not the expert in sales, then it is definitely worth listening in and recognizing where that resistance comes from. We all do it. Like when I'm feeling resistance to something which, still happen, I sit with it. What does it really mean for me? How was I interpreting that? What did that set off in my mind that has made me feel uncomfortable? So I like to just check in.
I love that. And actually, we had Alice Sheldon on the show not so long ago talking about fingerprint needs and how exactly this, when we're triggered, what is that telling you? Is it because our fingerprint needs aren't being met? Or is it something else? Is it like a skills gap or something cultural? If you relate to what you just said, go back and listen to that episode. You'll get some great advice there. So we were talking about advice that is not always right for us. And also how the old school reputation of sales doesn't feel right to many people either. Are there any sales myths or misunderstandings that you would like to really set right here and now?
Yeah, I think the biggest myth, it ties into this. It's interesting because when I create content using the word ick, which ick gives me the ick, but if I use that word, that is always, the algorithm loves it because people love that term. But it's made it into my mission to help people understand that sales is necessary for the world to go round. We have to understand how you have that transaction of you adding, whether it is value or whether it's a transformation in exchange for there being some kind of value exchange. So I think the biggest myth is that sales is somehow it's this thing that is separate to us. You said earlier about sales being something that, we all use or we all need to have in our business. The thing is, I know what you were saying. You were saying, and, we're selling all the time. We are, like, even this conversation, who we choose to be in a room with, this is sales because we're deciding who feels aligned with us, where we show up, who we have conversations with, what networking events we go to. Any of the parents here, I'm an auntie, so I relate to this, trying to get a child to come down the stairs in the time you need them to come down the stairs. That's called negotiation. If you ever had a young child who's like, I'm not coming down, you have to come up. And then they say, I remember this happening to a friend with her some child, meet me on the middle step. Well, that's called a negotiation. So I think, handling an objection, that's something we do every single day. So the myth is that sales is something that is separate to you. I think the second myth is that there is this particular style of selling. Even when I'm creating content, and let's say, so I create it first, and then I will go into AI and I will say, can you, check this? Can you look at my typos? Can you just check the grammar's right, for example? And, I was doing that yesterday, and I'd been in one AI tool, and then I went into another. And the second AI was able to tell me, that's not your style. That's not how you write. You wouldn't use that term. It was a much softer frame around a sales conversation that I was having. To go back to what you were saying is that there is only one way, and that it has to be something that feels awkward and difficult. When you are passionate about what you do, and when you spend time believing that you truly make a difference to the people whose lives you will impact or whose business you will impact, sales can start to feel really different.
Yeah, I think that's built into my program. Although we're actually talking about marketing, we start with understanding your true value and your clients and that overlap. But we also work on the self-belief side of it. You have to believe in what you're offering. And I find it really fascinating, because I don't think any woman starts a business without believing they can do it and believing they have something really valuable to offer. But very quickly, that tends to, oh no, can I really do this? Am I really good enough? But that belief is so important. And when you have that belief and confidence in your offer, what does that do to a sales conversation?
The energy that you hold when you believe in something. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, and they were talking about how they did this launch, and it was the very first launch they did. And they were saying, I didn't have anybody sign up. And then they followed it with, but I wasn't really behind it. Like, I didn't fully believe it. Yeah, I'm sounding like I'm an energy and mindset coach, and I'm not. Yet it's a fundamental pillar of sales, which is that if you aren't fully behind knowing that you can truly make a difference through the work that you do, it's going to come across. When we feel under pressure and when we feel like we have to make money, how much more difficult it is versus when we've got some financial security. Like, isn't it interesting? When the pressure is off, I would invite most people to look at this. When the pressure is off is generally when you attract the most amount of money into your business, because you don't need it in the same way. So yeah, it's a really valuable point around self-belief. And you were saying earlier, often when we launch a business, there can be some fear. Something really bizarre happened to me when I launched my business. I think I'd always been that person who was a bit risk averse. I didn't really want to, particularly not in your late 40s. It's not really the time to start taking a huge old risk when you've got a big mortgage and you're wondering financially, whether you can make that sacrifice. But the self-belief that I had, I do not know where it came from, but there was nothing was going to get in my way. And I think that was a lot to do with the stages of life I was at, the trauma I'd gone through, kind of losing somebody who I really loved. But that self-belief, like you've just said, that made people launch their business, that's almost what we have to tap back into. It's like, that knowing. Imagine if you just relied on that knowing and you just relied on your self-belief, how much more you could get done.
Yeah. I think at the beginning, our vision is really clear, and then we step into that, and then there are so many unknowns, then the self-doubt kicks in. But I think if we can stay true to that vision, then remind ourselves of that before a sales call, is that it's going to really put us in a much different place.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's why, you'll hear other sales coaches talk about it, but I've had this discussion with clients too. Before you have a sales call, like, go and get some fresh air, like listen to some nice relaxing music, smile before you get on the call. So rather than arriving on a sales call thinking, I need to get this sale, invite yourself instead to arrive on a call or on a conversation thinking, the one objective of this call is to see if it feels like a good fit for us both. It completely changes the energy because you're going into it genuine. Like, and not everyone should get an offer. Obviously, it depends what you do, but I'm going to assume this example of, a coach who's selling a mid to high ticket offer. Not everybody should get an invitation. Not everybody should get to have a sales call. And the purpose of the conversation is to identify if it feels like a fit for you both. And then and only then would an offer be made. So it's not about, here's my price, here's my offer. Okay, I'll wait to hear back from you. The energy there doesn't feel like it's an equal energy. So that's like a little tip I would just throw in there.
Yeah, I love that so much. And you were mentioning earlier about building your reputation and building your network and the people that know you and trust you. How much of that happens on social media and how much can we do without social media? You mentioned that particularly our sort of generation, we didn't grow up with social media. My first job, I didn't even have a computer. Everything was done with pen and paper.
Rolodex. That's what I had, a Rolodex, and those little round things that had like business cards in it.
Yeah. To get people to the point where you're having that audition, seeing if the energy is right between you. Is there a best way and does it have to be on social media?
A great question. And I think, well, the answer is definitely not. It does not have to rely on social media, but I think my answer might surprise some people. So because I had a career in sales where, I ran sales teams, but obviously I would have had, a leader ahead of me. There was a lot of pressure on networking, who you were seen talking to, and they used to call it effective sales conversations. How many effective sales conversations did you have? So we'd be at these events and like, God help you if you were seen stood in a huddle with your work colleagues, you'd be split up, you'd been asked who you were speaking to. So I think for me, there was a little bit of resistance to doing in-person networking because that's my backdrop. So I think by the time I was working for myself, I was like, I'm not doing anything that I have to do. I'm just going to do what I want to do. So where I'm going with this is that 100%, if you don't mind going to networking events and you find they are effective, great. I always say to people, you don't have to be on social media all the time. There are billions of people who are on social media, so it is an opportunity if it works for you. But I tell you what social media is really great for is it opens up, particularly in the business world, a business network for you. So for me, I have got the vast majority of my clients via the work that I initially did on social media. So of course, I now know lots of people in real life, but it all started on social media because my business is online. So I'm pretty much sat at my desk all day on calls. But so many people do Facebook groups, they have communities, they do free networking events. So what that allowed me to do was just build my network. So you don't have to start on social media, and there's absolutely, there's the chambers, there's organizations like BNI, then there's, lower ticket, probably less salesy networking events that you can go to. So there's definitely so many communities you can be a part of. Find what works for you. The only thing I do say to people is, for example, if you're not networking in person, which was me for a lot of the first couple of years, then what are you doing online? I've always been in coaching programs. So Melitta, when I launched my business, the first thing I did was join a coaching program with 75 people. So it was like going to university. And I still am so good friends with so many of those people. And I built clients and other coaches. So for me, I kind of automatically built networks. But so what I say to people is, even if you don't want to do social media, then great. What are you doing instead? Likewise, if you are not going to lots and lots of networking events, then where are you building relationships? And I think that's the key word. I talked about leverage at the very beginning and leveraging your contacts and your relationships and being in highly trusted spaces. But that didn't happen overnight. And I also never arrived with the intention of, right, where am I going to get my next client for? Some people that will work for, that was not me. But what I built was community and connection and conversation. And you learn so much from those three things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And networking was always something that I avoided and struggled with until I moved to Switzerland. And if I didn't figure this out, I would have no job, no friends. I would just be completely isolated Yeah. The worst place to learn to network, because there's 3 national languages, plus everyone speaks every other language as well. So you don't even know if they're going to speak English.
Well, okay, that is a really good way to test yourself.
Yeah. So, but my network has opened so many doors
Yeah.
to things that I would never have known about. I wouldn't have looked for certain opportunities, but they came to my network. And your network doesn't just give you these amazing opportunities, it gives you the encouragement to go with it as well.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
Because I think that's the thing, particularly when you are doing this full time. Less so now, because I actually don't have that much time now, but who else was going to be free on a random Thursday afternoon, whether it was for co-working or whether it was, just somebody else who was in that world. And you made a really good point there. The more people you connect with who are in this world, the more open you are to just hearing the information that they share, what platforms they're on, where they're hanging out, what they've tried, what worked, what didn't work. That has been, I think, really valuable in the speed at which suited me, because it had to suit me and it has to suit, any individual who is building a business, the speed at which I wanted to go. And I think there's a famous book, isn't there? What Makes the Boat Go Faster? And it just was having a little bit of intentionality of how quickly can I absorb myself in this world, and just being really open to what do I learn. So that's a really good point that you made there, is by you're in a place where you didn't know lots of people, but how much quicker you found that information out and how much quicker you would become known because you put yourself in spaces where people would meet you.
Yeah, exactly. We can have this tendency to rely on ChatGPT or Google, but your network knows you. Yeah. And they can recommend you to the right person, and people know you at the same time. Google doesn't get to know you and say, oh, by the way, yes, it's perfect for you. So yeah, I know people fear it, but if they're in that book, get my book. It will change the way you view it. But it's so crucial for all business owners to have that skill. And that's really where the sales process begins, right? Because as you're saying, it's building this message, this people understanding who you are and believing you're the kind of person that can deliver the promise that you are ultimately offering people. So, it starts with the networking, moves towards the sales conversation, and then beyond as well. So on that point, one thing that stood out to me on your website, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And what's that then? You talk about your authentic sales voice. What is that? And does that then feed into the way you choose to build your community and get known in whichever way you choose to do it?
Yeah, definitely. So I use the term in a few ways. So where authentic sales voice came from, it was around the same time that I decided that the word sales conversation was not very helpful to the way in which people wanted to feel who already didn't have a particularly positive relationship with sales. So I realized that what we were actually having is an authentic sales conversation. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that we are talking with sincerity. So even you just said that, what's your authentic sales voice? Same thing. It's about how do you sound like you're coming from a place of integrity? How do you sound like these are your words? So a script is a really good example. There are templates that are highly recommended for you to have effective sales conversations. And there is psychology behind why you take it from this point all the way down to the very last point of the sales conversation. So where the authentic sales voice comes in is that when you understand the psychology and the behavior and how people connect, mainly emotionally. So 80% of people make the decision to buy for the first time for emotional and not logical reasons. So that's why emotionally connecting with someone and sounding like you is really important, because you're also very likely to be one of many who do exactly the same thing that you do. So the more someone feels like this can sound really old school, but know, like, and trust me. And the more somebody feels like that, the easier it is for them to feel like they can connect with me. So it starts from social media. It's why video is so powerful, because people hear your intonation, they see the way you speak, they see the way you move. And then even when people meet you in person, they want to feel like you are the person that shows up on social media. Or if they're meeting you at a networking event and then they work with you, there shouldn't be like a caricature that you stepped into. So that's where the authentic sales voice came from, which is what feels true to you, what is going to fit with who you are, while still understanding buyer psychology and seller psychology. That's kind of where the authentic sales voice came from.
Yeah. And I think that's even more important now in the days of AI, because now I remember going to a presentation and this particular person was so excited because he can now do videos that AI makes a video with a picture of him and even recreates his voice. But then I was listening to this other lady and she was saying when it's not someone's voice, you can't hear the journey they've been on, the life they've lived. We unconsciously hear that in someone's voice. And if that's missing, then, we don't trust that person in the same way. And I remember when I very first started my business, I was doing communication consultancy and I was working with lots of small business owners. And, a lot of them were like, I like that website. Just make me one that looks and sounds like that. And I like this brochure. Make me one that looks. I was like, yeah, but it has to be you and your philosophy and your approach. No, don't worry about that. Just make it sound like that. And I just had that so often. And I was trying to explain, if you do that, yeah, I could absolutely 100% do that and mimic whatever voice. But when you turn up for a sales conversation and it's really you, they're going to be like, who is this person? Because you're not going to sound like this. So I love this idea of you're finding your authentic sales voice, and then you can weave that through everything that you do. And that's going to build this connection. As you said, you can only attract the right people to you if you're being yourself. Otherwise, it's just, try and be someone else. You'll attract all the wrong people that are going to be a nightmare for you to work with. So all goes hand in hand. Yeah, I really like this concept.
And I think one of the things that's really great that I can see right now is, if I think about the topic of your podcast and, your TEDx talk that you've done, but there are a lot of people out there whose voice is not necessarily about shouting or being the loudest. You and I were talking about your forthcoming book. I'm not going to not reveal any titles that might be coming up, but it's just about, it's okay to have the quiet voice, or it's okay to be more introverted. It's okay to have a more natural style of selling or a more natural style to you of being in business, but it's owning it. And I think that is something that I really saw very early on. There was a couple of things that happened for me. One was, I was fortunate that I did enjoy being on camera. Like I wasn't facing any fear around being on social media. But I remember going to an event, and it was the first time since I had launched my business and I'd been on social media that I'd been to an event where I felt like a celebrity. So many people knew me, and they knew me because of how much I was appearing on camera and speaking. Now, I'm not saying that that's the only thing that you had to do, but why it was powerful. Two things happened that day, actually. One was, I remember the number of people who came up to me like, are you Suman? And, whatever my Instagram handle was at the time. But the second thing is that they thought I was approachable because of how I'd come across on social media. But the third thing, and this was the bit that really stood out for me, everyone was lovely. They had obviously thought I was approachable, but a lot of people had said I was much softer than I was coming across on social media, because corporate Suman had launched the business. So there I was, with a much more kind of corporate professional front. And I realized that I needed to connect with people on a one-to-one. So we just talked about websites there. I brought more color into my branding. At that point, it had been black and white. This, by the way, this is all sales, because I realized I needed to soften the edges around my brand, because then that would change because who was being attracted to me, because the feedback that I was getting, people thought I was really professional, but maybe they were a bit like, oh, she's going to be a bit scary to work with. So I had to soften those edges. And again, that really helped me grow my business, because I was starting to be truer to who I was. So yeah, thought that might be a little useful anecdote there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no right or wrong. It's just you.
Exactly.
And on that front, you were saying there about quieter voices. Have you noticed a different style that suits people who are more introverted versus people who are extroverted? And I'm not talking about people who are shy, because I think that introverts and extroverts can be shy, particularly when it comes to promoting their own business. But yeah, in terms of, I guess, managing the energy and feeling that confidence in leading a conversation, is there anything that you've seen, like introverts definitely shouldn't try to do this, but however, this works amazingly well?
Yeah, I think you make a really valid point there, actually. And it's quite interesting when I was thinking about coming on this podcast and I listened to some previous episodes, I was like really thinking about how do I tap into understanding how different people might feel. So yes, I have a more extrovert side to my personality, but why I just smiled there is I can be really shy, which I know not everybody believes, but I actually can be. I like my own space, very happy to be on my own. I'm quite, I'm good to go into performance mode, like when I need to, but actually I can definitely have my shy moments. So to tap into what you were saying, yes, I've worked with lots of people who are more introverted, but sometimes we have to check in. Is it really introversion or is it fear of judgment? I can think of one person in particular. This was like 3 years ago. I was running a group program. She signed up. I never knew what she looked like until the third call because she never turned her camera on. She didn't have any pictures on her social media. She paid on time and she seemed really genuine. But where that came from was actually, yes, she definitely is more introverted, but it came from fear of judgment. So a lot of the work was around fear of judgment. The second piece of information that was really useful is helping her recognize and believe her worth of what it is that she does as a coach and really tapping into connecting with who she wanted to attract. You just said that a little bit earlier, we want to attract someone who's going to be a good fit for us. So I think when it comes to showing up as your authentic self and when it comes to showing up in a way that works best for you, not everybody in a room, whether it's a virtual room or whether it's an in-person event, not everybody wants to speak to the loudest person in the room. You won't be the only person in that room who is more quiet. If I think about some of the coaches I've worked with, what has amazed me is I've worked with very successful coaches who I have then discovered are really introverted. I would never guess. But what they have said to me is, some of them run events and they're like, they just tap into that, but then they're very boundaried around the rest of the time. So it is totally possible for introverted people to be incredibly successful at sales because actually, in a way, you're even more emotionally in tune. You've got that intuition and you actually, it's really powerful. If what you are good at is that one-to-one conversation, like how deep you can go in a one-to-one conversation and make somebody feel valued rather than maybe somebody who's like life and soul of the party, spreading themselves amongst everybody. You may not making any judgments on either, but you may not feel like you are as valued.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think introverts have naturally badass skills when it comes to sales because we do naturally like to listen, gather all the information, think about things before coming to a conclusion. And that's exactly what a sales call is designed to do. And we're very happy for the other person to speak more than us. So, I think there are so many of our skills that lend themselves beautifully to sales conversations. And once you have a bit of structure around that so that you can follow that process. And the other thing that I learned from another introverted sales coach was that, introverts have a process and they'll stick to it. Extroverts have a process and they'll wing it more often. And then things fall apart and don't work quite the same way. So I think we have lots of skills. So thank you for confirming that.
Yes, I'm definitely confirming that. And actually, you said there about when you're having a sales conversation, your potential client or dream client, as I like to call them, they should be doing most of the talking anyway, because as human beings, we like to talk about ourselves. So it makes sense on a sales call. The purpose of a sales call is at the end of that call, you should know more about them rather than them know more about you, because actually the intention of that call is to understand what it is that they need and then to demonstrate to them how there is a match, if there is a match with what you do. So yeah, being able to listen and acknowledge what somebody is saying is a very, very powerful skill.
And I have one last big topic that I want to tap into. And it comes back to what we were saying earlier about sales being done badly and not wanting to go into that space, and a bit of a, not really a fear of social media, but really just not quite feeling that it's the right thing to do. But one thing that can be very effective, and a lot of sales coaches and business coaches and everybody talks about this, and it's the outreach. So sending people a message on social media with the intent to start a relationship and that will hopefully end in a sale. We've all received this done very well. Do you have any thoughts on this? And if you do, what does a DM strategy that's successful look like?
Another superb question. So I do have a two-tiered strategy, or like two-pronged strategy. So I would say, and I've kind of regularly said this, I feel like I'm in my magnetic era. And what I mean by that is I've got to a point in my business where it's coming to me. However, that on its own would not be building any future foundations, because I wouldn't be bringing any new people into my audience. My network will just remain my network, or it won't grow as fast. So DMs are, I mean, I'm smiling when I say this because there is so much resistance to DMs. So there is a caveat with this. DMs are a really effective strategy for nurturing, that's the word, nurturing your potential audience. Where people go wrong is to try to take it very quickly into selling. So I can give you a classic example. I'm afraid I'm quite ruthless. If we have never spoken before and we connect on LinkedIn, and the very first message that you send me is this long, a really long message. I realize not everybody will be looking at me, might be listening, but it's a really long message where you're basically selling, not even basically, you're selling to me. There's not even two chances in that. Like, for me, that is just so rude. You don't know what I need. You don't know what I want. You don't know if I need this. I think the worst one I ever received was a complete stranger inviting me onto a weight loss boot camp. That person didn't get blocked. We had a conversation first. I just thought it was so inappropriate. You know, you don't know my history with weight loss, or you're making judgments about me. So I think you have to be very, very careful there. So the art of a successful DM is, the intention behind the DM is find something that you have in common. So if you are going to go into the DMs, what is your point of connection? Is it somebody you both have in common? Is it that they just wrote something really interesting? Is it that they commented on the post? There is a lot of suspicion around DMs because so many people do it so badly. So what if instead you were just really strategic and you thought of it as an opportunity to help you build your community? Think about the connection that you might make, and then there might be somebody strategically that you nurture and you reciprocally support each other's content. I realize not everybody works with other businesses, so actually not your potential clients might not all be engaging in your content, but whoever your community is, like, just genuinely get to know people. So one other thing I was going to say about that, and again, this could be a Suman thing. So like I said, even though I'm a salesperson, if you come straight into my DMs and sell to me before we have even said hello, that's a no-no. Likewise, if you find that you are selling before you've ever had any conversation with someone, it's really quite dangerous because you're making some assumptions there. But the other thing to really consider there is, when you are going into the DMs, most people are really busy. We're busier than we ever have been. Being honest, what my favorite, yes, this has really happened to me, my favorite packet of crisps is, might be fun if I'm in a frivolous mood, but ultimately I don't really have time to talk about what my favorite flavor of crisps is. I mean, you know, maybe if you find me in the right space, we can have that conversation. So I think don't go overly frivolous. So it's like, you've got to get the sensible middle point. What platform are you on? How have they connected? Like, a genuine question I like to ask. Well, this is more an Instagram question. Thank you so much for connecting with me. Oh, I see we know a few people in common. It's always useful to know, where did you come across me? Like, hear how light that feels. I had to find the words that felt right to me, but I genuinely want to know what was it in particular so I can do more of it. I don't then send them a lead magnet unless it comes up in conversation. However, they are then noted as someone that I will then speak to again, because I want to build genuine community and connection. Only then am I going to get to hear information that's going to help me understand when is a good time to go to the next step.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting because, as you said, it's good to keep the conversation light, ask a question, but something that's really simple and easy to answer.
That's perfect. Yeah.
But then very often people get stuck in lots of little questions that you're like, I don't know how to switch this to the point of, shall we work together? Is there a kind of sweet spot of how many messages before we say, hi, you actually look like someone I could work with?
Yeah. Yeah, a really, really good question. I mean, if you were following the structure, then it's normally 3 to 4 messages. It could be within the course of a day. It might be over a couple of days. Let's say it's more targeted. Let's work through an example here. So, hi, thanks so much for connecting with me. Really appreciate it. See, we've got a few people in common. Always curious to ask where you came across me, or was there anything in particular that resonated? Let's say the person responds with, always find sales a little bit difficult. They are sharing a struggle straight away. So that is my opportunity to find out a little bit more about, so first thing is, I hear that a lot. So always reflect back, show them that they are not alone in thinking that way. Second question that you might ask is, what have you tried, or what do you find most challenging? Get them to speak about it so you learn a little bit more about it. If a couple of questions in, you're seeing that they're being open with their information, then a really nice question to ask is, would you like any help to get there? Or have you considered investing in some support to get there? So you're genuinely asking them, is this something that you want help with? So it's not, do you want to work with me? Shall we book a clarity call? Say, I'd be really happy to jump on a call and help. Is this something that you're considering? And they then have the option to say, actually, no, not at this point. Say, okay, great. I've got some great content coming up. Obviously, keep in touch. You know where I am. But it's asking that question. Are you looking to invest in support? Are you looking for help? If they say yes, that means you've sought permission. You can then go to the next part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think that permission is so key, isn't it? And Anthony Steers, on his episode, he was talking about the permission to speak. So just that permission to start a conversation with someone, and then start that conversation and wait to that moment where you have the permission to sell, but never making that assumption.
I love that you're quoting all these incredible people. Yeah, definitely. Like, that is, because actually this is a lot the ethos of what I believe. Another really quick example there is, if you are, let's say you've got an offer that you think would be really suited to somebody that you spoke a few months ago, rather than just sending them the offer, you say, hope you're well. How are you getting on with the specific challenge they may have mentioned to you previously? I have something coming up. Shall I share more? Would you be interested in hearing more? And it goes back to what you were just saying about permission to share. I'm a big fan of seeking permission rather than just throwing something into somebody's inbox that they may not even read.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess if they are asking for that information, then it makes sense for you then to follow up. Was that helpful? Did you get the chance? Do you have any questions? You know who's got that information. Whereas if you're just spamming people, you can't follow up nicely because you don't know who did what with what. Plus, you're blocked anyway.
Exactly. They blocked you. But that again is a really good question. So what questions can I help with? So let's say you sent someone a proposal and they haven't got back to you. You can say, so there's two approaches that work really well. One is make it an easy no. So, is this something you'd like to know more about? Or do you feel like you've got what you need for now? Because they then got 2 alternative questions and they just have to answer one of them. Or the other is, what questions do you have that I can help with, instead of a yes or no answer? So yeah, again, a really good tip there to how you can kind of go back in when you sent somebody a proposal.
Yeah, amazing. Suman, we've covered so much, it's so much. I feel like, oh my gosh, a complete masterclass. Is there anything you feel that we haven't touched on that might be helpful for the audience when they get started and like taking all this advice and doing something with it?
Yeah, I think it depends, obviously it depends where you're at in your journey. But I think the most important thing here is to really get very clear on the transformation that you offer. When you're really clear on how you can make a change for someone, and when you have got some proof that there are people, and remember, you only need one. You only need one person to invest. And they always say, if you get one, you will get another. As long as there is proof that there are people who need the very solution that you're offering, and as long as you are clear on the transformation, then you have got a really good foundation. And then it's just really tapping into believing that all sales is it's just the outcome of there being a match. It's literally matchmaking between somebody who can solve something and someone who has the desire for something to be solved. So that was the only kind of thing that I wanted to add on at the end, rather than opening up a whole nother conversation, which would be another podcast. So I feel like that's a nice one to end on.
Yeah, fantastic. Suman, thank you so much. And if people want to buy your book, so it's called
More Bollocks, Less Hustle. It's more ethical sales in your small business. So it's more heart, less hustle.
Yeah, brilliant. And they can get that, I'm assuming, on Amazon and all the right places. Yeah. And if they want to know more about you and your work, where's the best place for them to connect?
Thank you so much for inviting me on and allowing me to share this information. So my Instagram handle is I am Suman Randhawa. Yeah, literally, I am Suman Randhawa. That is where you can find me. My main two platforms are LinkedIn. So if you do /LinkedIn, and then it's I am Suman Randhawa, and Instagram are the main two places to find me. And I would love to connect with anybody who's just interested in being in a space where we talk about more ethical sales. So thank you, Melitta, for inviting me on today.
You're welcome. And we'll put all of those links in the show notes as well, of course, and you can get those at melittacampbell.com/podcast. Suman, thank you so much. And I'm sure this is not going to be the last conversation we're going to have on this.
I really look forward to continuing this. But yeah, thank you. And I hope this just leaves people feeling like sales is not something to be feared, but it's actually something that is going to enable us to have so much more impact in our businesses.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you have found this episode helpful and you're all set to use your authentic sales voice to attract more of the right people into your business and have those wonderful sales conversations that result in more of your dream clients. If you have found the episode helpful, then do leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and come and let me know in an email or a message on LinkedIn what has been your key takeaway. Has Suman helped change your mindset around sales? And what are you going to do this week to test out your new knowledge and use that to grow your business and impact? And remember, if you are looking to grow your business in a way that's quietly impactful, go and download the Introverts Business Growth Playbook at melittacampbell.com/playbook. I'm Melitta Campbell, your business coach and value whisperer, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode next Wednesday. Bye.